back to another episode of Hop, Skip and a Jump. Today I'm joined by the incredible Dr Carol Hughes from Biome4Pets. I've long been fascinated by the relationship of the canine microbiome and a dog's pain experience and how the two interlink. So let's jump into this conversation. Dr. Carol Hughes, thank you so much for joining me today. I have been fascinated with the canine microbiome for many years now, but you have been working with the canine microbiome for years. So tell me, how did you fall into this particular branch of science? What was it that drew you to look at the microbiome?
Well, it was all a mistake, really. We weren't looking at the microbiome. We were looking at a drug at research into using natural plant chemicals as drugs. So we were on a kind of drug discovery journey with Cardiff University and Aberystwyth University. And we got to the point, and we did a trial with Butcher's Pet Care.
Yeah.
We were looking at a product or a compound that was anti-obesity, so that it was like a natural steroid, and it would speed up metabolic pathways, and you could extract it from wild spinach, actually, which is quite useful.
Wow.
And quinoa. Anyway, we'd got as far as second stage research, which we were really pleased about. And suddenly the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons said, well, okay, for the next stage, we have to put dogs in cages, beagles in cages. How many do you want? And we want, oh no, we don't want to do it. And without that, we couldn't progress. So we kind of went, oh, that's that then, 10 years of research down the drain. But luckily, Butcher's Pet Care, they didn't like that kind of thing either. And they said, well, even if you succeed, if you put them in cages, we can't use it because people don't like dogs in cages. I mean, for me, it was a no-brainer. We never would have put a dog in a cage. So that was that. And then we were kind of a bit down in the dumps about it. And we met Professor Newbold, who said, well, who was into ruminant research in the microbiome. And they were actually leaders in the field at the time. And he just said, well, it doesn't have to pass the gut wall barrier, whatever it is you're researching. Just let's put it into the gut, see what it does to the microbes, and you can follow it through that way. And we'd never thought about that. And because well, obviously, why would you think, you'd always been used to having to get this thing across the gut wall in whatever form and follow it through as a drug, but I've never really considered it might not need to do that. It could have an effect on the microbes, and that would be equally important. So we changed direction in an instant, really, and he knew the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. We didn't go on to progress it because we just became fascinated with microbiome research, and it just seemed a nicer thing to do. It was just more, I think it was a whole kind of ecology sort of ecosystem thing that was going on at the time, this holistic look at who we are in our environment. And I think the gut microbiome is part of that. So we changed direction and never regretted it, really. It was great.
What
Yeah,
a
loved it.
fascinating journey, because you're absolutely right. We don't want to be putting dogs in cages, and beagles in cages and seeing how they react. I also think I always find studies like that, they leave a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, because
Yeah,
really, is that a true reflection? You've got
no,
a dog that's in a sterile environment because you're trying to look at one variable, and like you say, there's actually far less invasive things like looking at the microbiome, because what you're dealing with is, well, waste matter
yeah,
to get your answers for stuff. So that's then progressed. So you've turned and gone, right, okay, actually we need to look at this microbiome. So how did you
yeah,
set out in partnership with Cardiff University to create to build your team, and build, because you've got a team and this
yeah,
lab
yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So
Well, the Professor Jamie Newbold, he was leader in his field, definitely. So we did a lot with the Aberystwyth team, especially around manipulating the microbiome, which has always been my interest, especially using natural plant compounds, because they are very effective at changing the microbes and for good or not so good. So we kind of pursued that for a bit, but then he left Aberystwyth and I think he moved to Scotland. So there was no one with his expertise that took over. So for quite a while, it kind of went dead in the water. But also we had to have a freezer van that we drove around the country picking up samples because it had to be frozen fresh for this particular wet method of analysis. It had to be frozen at -80 within minutes of picking it up. So it was all this bizarre thing that, it was really exciting, really enjoyed it. But I don't know what we were doing, but we were just looking at new stuff and kind of enjoying it. And then I think about 4 years later, we just ticked over with it, really. We knew we wanted to do it. We just didn't know how we were going to manage. Suddenly, the way of preserving samples changed. So we could sort of try and work towards a commercial testing service, which it then took us 2 years to get a collection kit with Professor Chris Gwennon. He helped us with that, with a biosensor type of collection kit. So we did that for a bit. And then we just went, well, let's do it then. Let's launch a commercial service. So one afternoon I built a website, as you do, and off we went. We didn't have the database. We had some data, but not what we have now, obviously. So we've kind of learned as we've gone on, and I think people have come on the journey and learned with us, really.
Yeah, and as well, the data set that you have is ginormous, and I think so for you to better understand, say, a result. I'm assuming the more participants you have and the bigger data set you have as a comparison is going to give us more accurate results.
Yeah, because it helps you calculate a healthy core. I think there are companies in America that do similar, but dogs in America are slightly different. The core will always be different in different countries, so it helps you work out that core if the higher the population data set you have, but also it helps you work out what's healthy in the population. And so when you go into diseases and ill health, you still need that massive data set to kind of look at, to work out why it might be contributing to disease. Because in the microbiome, a bacteria can be good until it gets too many. If it gets too high, then it becomes bad. And too few is as bad as too many. They'll both have an impact on the gut, but levels are different in different populations. So you have to have that information to be accurate in what you're concluding in the report. And it changes, as the microbiome changes, we change the report to because we can see the changes happening in the microbiome, because it is an ecosystem. It's not going to stay the same. The core will stay more or less the same, but then, there are huge changes that can go on around an environmental challenge, let's say. So you just have to be ready for that.
Yeah, so you're constantly having to evolve the business and evolve your reports as the microbiome changes and everything. It was interesting as well with regards to the geographical location and how that can influence things. So I have an ex-Romanian street dog, and I imagine her microbiome when she first came over, I think she's been here 5 years now, but there still will be elements of that which will be inherently, I imagine, stronger, maybe more diverse than what my other two dogs who were born in the UK with the silver spoon in their mouth, like, she's had to eat things that have been decaying in order to survive, which is then gonna, especially early doors as well. So with I think it's in human microbiome research, it's about at the age of 2, I believe, that our microbiome starts to establish a little bit of a foundation. What would you say is that kind of window of opportunity for our dogs, if there is one?
I think they're a little bit high. I think a year old, I think, is an age. And you were talking about the street dogs. they tend to use pathogens, which I love the pathogens, not obviously not to high amounts, but they kind of prime the immune system, and street dogs use them as an immune response, which I think is really clever. But of course, they come over and we change the diets and we have to medicate them or whatever it is we do. And that just knocks that sort of basic response they have, which is a shame, but I think they still keep the bacteria, but just at low amounts, really.
Yeah. And as well, the amount of drugs and vaccinations they have to come into the country. So like when I think of Peggy, like the fact that she got to the age of 3 on the streets and then she was in a kill shelter and she hadn't been, I know the words kill and shelter shouldn't go together, but unfortunately
they shouldn't.
Yeah, in Romania they're like council run like kill shelters, but the fact that she got to the age of 3 in that environment and didn't die of distemper, distemper's quite bad over them, parvo as well, not so much hepatitis, but those two, like, can you imagine how robust her immune system will have been? And then she had to have all the vaccinations, and then you have to have a rabies jab to come into the UK, and then flea and worm and da-da-da-da-da. But as soon as she landed here, zilch, nothing. She's had nothing since. But interestingly, when we did I did a titer test. I think she'd been here maybe 3 years or something, and she was covered for absolutely everything. Absolutely everything. She was good, and I was like, right, you're never having another vaccination in your life. I've seen the immunity in the titer test. Job's good in. My other 2 dogs, because I've gone from being a very conventional pet parent to a very, I don't know what you call it, natural, holistic. I just don't like to pump chemicals into my animals. They were only protected against one, and they had every single vaccine as a puppy and a year's top up as well. And there were 2 diseases they technically weren't covered for. So I had to sit and I had to think, and I was like, well, if they've not been exposed to those particular diseases in the environment, why would that immunity be in the blood? And I was like, I feel comfortable not vaccinating. So then I was like, why am I titer testing? It's told me that it's not got, they've not got covered to something, but actually I'm okay not vaccinating against them. But I find it fascinating the difference between the two. So the service that you offer then, is that just for UK dogs at the moment?
No, we do dogs from anywhere, because we have got enough data now, we can cover most places. Got a lot from Australia, America, and Croatia and Poland. Actually, people are really into it there. So we do make adjustments, but so we don't mind if dogs from other places. I think what's interesting is Australia has really high levels of pathogens, which you wouldn't think it would have, because they're very careful about what can come into the country, aren't they?
Yes.
But they obviously have a bit of a wild life, I think. I'm going to imagine that's what they have. There's still this sort of access to an environment that will promote those pathogenic bacteria, whereas we've killed them all off, sadly, or most of them, which is a bit sad, really. And I don't know how we get them back, but there we go.
It comes down to how we intensively farm in the UK, and the stuff that they're spreading on the fields and just spraying everything. It comes down to what's in our water, what's on the crops, what's going into the animals that we're then feeding our animals. Like it's this huge ecosystem. And just to bring it back to pain, because it's me and I love to talk about pain. For me, the microbiome is its own ecosystem. When you have a dog, they're their own ecosystem, but the landscape and the tapestry of a pain experience is also an ecosystem to me anyway. Because there's so many different contributing factors, and this is something that you came and guest lectured for Yorkshire Peaches Therapies about, that link between the pain and microbiome. I think for me, when I first started with kind of going, what is this microbiome? Okay, I know what's going on. Why is it just germs? And actually, it is. Oh my gosh, it is so. It's in a way it's very complicated, but then on like the flip side of it, if you feed good, nutritious, whole foods, it'll kind of look after itself until there is disease present. So, in your opinion, if we look at the landscape of, say, dogs in the UK, what would you say is the biggest disease or issue that you're seeing with the work that you're doing?
Well, I think definitely this summer we've seen an issue with the water. You were saying about the water. I think a lot of water boards use soft sand filtration as a process of cleaning the water. But for some reason this year, there's been an introduction of cyanobacteria, which is a waterborne disease or a waterborne bacteria. That's got into the gut. And what you're saying about the food and the diet should be right. But in this case, when cyanobacteria meets other bacteria, it's much stronger. And without that immune response that we seem to have lost a lot of in the microbiome because of the stresses from the environment that have been on the dog microbiome anyway, at least for the last 4 years, the cyanobacteria are too strong. So they've wiped half of it out. So this year we've been panicking because we get seeing dogs with, say, 30-40% cyanobacteria, having everything else wiped out, and the microbiome mounts a response that it starts making antibiotics. But in doing that, it also reduces other bacteria that are part of nutrition. So you're actually getting quite a malnutritioned dog this year. Now, I hope it won't last because we've been through this before. We went through it with COVID-19 when something took over. But this is the similar sort of thing, but it's coming from the environment. So we're just hoping that this passes through. Otherwise, we are going to be stuck with quite a microbiome that has no diversity and a dog that has no immune system for a while, you know. So
and
I think
any time without an immune system is not is a dangerous time.
So I think what I'm seeing is how often you can link the diet. The diet is the biggest shifter of what a microbiome community should be. It does have the biggest effect, but microbes are microbes. They're not, they do their own thing. So within this community of microbes, if you introduce a microbe that's stronger, it will wipe everything out. So if it wipes the bacteria out that eat food, that food's going to go through undigested to a large amount or less digested. And it doesn't matter how you feed that dog, you won't recover the microbiome until you get a handle on what these bacteria are that's come in and taken over. We've also had it with Shigella when fish got a disease that came from the bacteria Shigella. It was passed through the food chain, and the dog is incredibly sensitive, I think far more than humans. And it wiped out everything again. I think that was about 7 years ago that happened. Right, okay. And it took about a year for it to clear. So we do see things like that turn up quite often. And it's quite interesting. Well, often 3 times in the last 10, 12 years.
And what would you say is something that would, like, say, prompt a pet parent to go, I think that the water, something is not right with the water? Is it a particular symptom as such, or is it just that the dog's just not absorbing their food properly, which then results in malnutrition? Would you say that's the main kind of sign?
I think with this, most dogs, when we've checked, is acid reflux. It seems to go with that.
Really? Gosh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
But we are seeing it settle a little bit now. I have to say I'm holding my breath because I have no idea with cyanobacteria. It's quite an ugly bacteria, so I'm not sure. It's not a pathogen as such because it's an invasive. It causes disease and it's invasive, so it doesn't actually have any benefits. We'll see. We'll have to see.
Just have to wait and see. We'll have to touch base in a year's time and go, right, okay, what do we need to do now? So says it comes back and, you know, we think it's, you know, suspectedly something that's come from the water. What are your thoughts on filtered water? Filtering your water for your dogs?
I think because I don't know if you've tried to look into water treatments, they're really difficult to find out actually what goes on. We've actually had to go through the universities and find an expert that's interested in bacteria that escape filtration or that survive. And there aren't many of those around. It's quite hard to find one. So we've been looking since June, and we found this one. And he said it should eventually settle. It's because they've changed something in the filtration system. They've introduced it, because I think if they introduce a metal, or like something like brass, if they use a metal to help with the filtration, I don't understand it all, then it does allow the cyanobacteria to escape being filtrated out. So I'm hoping it's a blip, but interesting that it sort of turns up.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm up in Yorkshire, so the water is really hard here.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard, and it wasn't until that I started filtering my water I realised I can't drink tap water.
No,
That's not been that. I don't know if it. I think my house is maybe 28 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
So like if I was to drink tap, all I can taste is the pipes. It's really weird.
Yeah.
Like until like we started with like a Brita filter, but then we went on to actually have a proper filter fitted to the bottom, like underneath the sink, so everything's filled that comes out of that particular tap. And I know it's like, I don't know enough about it to be honest, but like I know people who like distill their water, because sometimes when you filter and you're taking too much out, I'm like, do you know what? As long as it doesn't taste like pipes, I'm good. And if that tastes like, if I can taste that, what's that taste like for the dogs?
Well, I think it's interesting for me. We have our water filtered through Mount Snowdon, because we're at the base of Mount Snowdon, or whatever the Welsh name is for it. And I should know because I live here. It filters through granite, and it's beautiful. Our holding tank is a slate box in the field that's been there for a couple of 100 years. And it's so fantastic that when I go somewhere, I can actually smell the water.
Really?
I can smell other people's water, and it's really off-putting. So for a dog, our dogs drink the same water. For them to go somewhere else, they probably smell it more than I do, really, because they've got better senses, haven't they? But you can smell it.
Yeah, that's insane. I bet your water's really beautiful. Oh my
God,
that sounds like idyllic. But with this, so when like I'm talking to customers just about their dog's health, and they say, oh, they won't drink the water I put down for them, but they'll drink out of a puddle. And I was like, because that water's cleaner.
Now.
That's
why?
Yeah, that'll be cleaner and won't smell like pipes compared to the stuff that's coming out of the tap. That's so interesting about the water. So so obviously we've had this going on this year, and we're hoping that it's just a blip. Is there anything that you can maybe see as like, I don't know, like a projection for next year, as something that you think might become an issue, or something that you're seeing like early door signs at the moment?
Well, I think Sutterella, I don't know if we've talked about that, but it's linked to ADHD. I think that's on the increase. It's got a relationship, and it's actually a relationship with dogs that are fed raw. It seems to be forming a relationship, because that's the other thing that bacteria do. They get mates, so they join up with another bacteria that so they can all get on and gang up against another, because they're competing for resources. And that's what you always have to be careful of, is that whatever you're feeding them or whatever you're doing, you don't encourage those relationships that shouldn't be happening. And I think certainly Stutterella and Fusobacteria are forming some kind of relationship. So I'm thinking ADHD-like symptoms in dogs may be something I see more of, in the couple of years to come, because they're quite hard to get rid of. Stutterella are really difficult to kill off. They're not, and they exist in people with ADHD or whatever, that those we call it these days. So
neurodivergency.
They get passed from people to the dog, but they don't suit the dog because they weren't meant to be there. Before COVID, we only saw them at kind of 1% of the microbiome, and now they're up to 10-15% or higher if they had their link to their mate, this Fusobacteria. They get very strong when they've got a friendship, and
I
very difficult.
never thought that bacteria would make friends with other bacteria. I just thought it'd all just be like a pit fight. But it's interesting what you say about the ADHD like behaviours. So another one of my interests is hypermobility.
Yeah,
I see a lot of dogs that are hypermobile displaying ADHD like symptoms. I think
yeah,
there's going to be another 20 years, 10 to 20 years before the veterinary industry acknowledges that, dogs can be neurodivergent, but certainly from what I see in clinic, if a dog is hypermobile, they have struggles with over arousal, hyper arousal, gut issues,
yeah.
obsessive behaviors. Like it all, nothing
Mm,
nothing exists singularly. It's all, again, it's coming back to that ecosystem. So I think this is
yeah,
why I love to kind of talk about the gut and the microbiome and food as a canine therapist, because I feel like not enough therapists. It's not that they're not interested, but I think because it can be a little bit of a daunting subject.
yeah,
Like, oh,
yeah,
can't
yeah,
talk about food because it gets a little bit political, doesn't it? And it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
do you know, it doesn't have to be political. There's a whole
No,
world of things there that can help make the services that we offer more robust. Even if it's a case of, do you know what? Given the other symptoms that your dog's got, we've got hypermobility, we've got gut sensitivity. Let's just have that microbiome checked and just see what's going on in there.
yeah.
It's just that holistic approach to whole body health. So for anyone listening now, if you could give them one recommendation, so regardless of what diet they feed or what's going on with the dog, if you could say people need to put this one thing into their dog's bowl, what would it be for you? What would be your top tier of?
Um, I'd go for rosemary because it's a really strong antimicrobial against anything,
Nice.
except for dogs that have seizures with
Mm-hmm.
that very long name that border terriers have, and I should remember, and I
I
can't.
know which one. I should also remember, but I don't. I know what you're on about. So it'd be
Yeah.
rosemary. No, would that be fresh rosemary?
Yes,
Yeah.
fresh, dried, whichever way you can get them to eat it,
Mm-hmm.
that would be fantastic because it's a great killer of lots of bacteria that are like form biofilms. It breaks up biofilms, and that was the friendships we were talking about. Once the bacteria have made friends, they then form a biofilm,
Mm-hmm.
and they're harder to get rid of. So the rosemary would break up that. But some dogs seem to react to it because it's quite strong. So be careful how you give it, but
Yeah.
I definitely go for that above everything.
Rosemary is a good contender.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Carol, thank you so much. As always, you're going to send me down about 20 different rabbit holes now of researching things. You're absolutely fascinating to speak to. Thank you so much for your time. Now, if people want to speak to you, use your microbiome service, where do they find you on social media and on the internet?
Yeah, well, we're on Facebook. I think the group's called Biome4Pets. I think it's just Biome for Pets.
Mm-hmm.
The website,
Yeah.
biomeforpets.com, and Instagram, I think that's biomeforpets.co.uk, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go
But
for
if you
that.
put in Biome for Pets, you'll
Yeah,
pop up. And
yeah,
then, so for people who are interested in using your service to assess their dog's microbiome, that's something that they can just do through the website, and they get a kit
yeah,
sent out to them, and then they send it off to you, and they get a lovely shiny report.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Lots of help and support.
Perfect. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Dr. Carol Hughes is an absolute font of knowledge when it comes to the canine microbiome. Now, if you want to hear more from Dr. Carol, especially the link between microbiome and canine pain, make sure you check out my online learning series at yorkshirepooches.co.uk. On there is a lecture all about the topic, and it's a lovely bolt onto this conversation that we've had today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And for now, take care. Lots of love to you and your dogs. Bye.